Have you ever had that feeling where the number on your driver's license just doesn't quite match up with how you feel on the inside? For some of us, that gap is more like a canyon. Today, we're going to dig into the science of what's called accelerated maturity, why some people feel so much older than they are, and what that feeling is actually telling us about their life and their health.
So let's just start with a really direct question. How old do you feel right now, in this moment? I'm not talking about your chronological age, but that age you feel deep down inside. It turns out that number you just thought of isn't just a random feeling. It's actually a super powerful clue about our overall well-being. You know, for most adults, there's this funny thing called the subjective rejuvenation effect. On average, people feel about 11.5% younger than they actually are. But there's a really significant group of people who feel the exact opposite, this constant nagging sense of being much, much older. And that's not just a bad mood, it's a signal we really need to listen to. Okay, so just to be super clear, we're juggling two different ideas here. Your chronological age, well, that's just a number, it's fixed. But your subjective age, that's your own perception, and it can change. And what the science is showing us loud and clear is that how old you feel can actually predict your future health way better than the number of candles on your birthday cake.
So where did this feeling even come from? Well, the leading theory is something called the interoceptive hypothesis. It's the idea that your brain is constantly running a background check on your body. It's scanning your energy levels, any inflammation, how sharp you're thinking. So feeling older isn't just in your head, it might actually be your brain's final report on what's happening biologically.
And believe me, the stakes here are incredibly high. People who feel younger have real, measurable advantages, like more gray matter in their brain and better heart health. But on the other side of the coin, feeling older is a serious warning sign. It's linked to a much higher risk for pretty much everything you don't want, from strokes to a shorter life. This is why it's so important to understand what's behind that feeling.
And one of the biggest drivers of this feeling, well, it often starts way back in childhood. It's rooted in this psychological dynamic that basically forces a kid to grow up way, way too fast.
There's a word for this, parentification. It's basically a total role reversal in a family. The child is forced to become the caregiver, the one who has to manage adult emotions and problems. They learn to push their own needs for comfort and play to the side, essentially giving up their own childhood to take care of everyone else.
And here's the really twisted part. From the outside, these kids often get a ton of praise. People call them so mature or an old soul. But all that praise on the outside just hides this massive internal cost of carrying burdens that no child is equipped to handle.
And that cost, it follows them right into adulthood. Because they were trained to ignore their own needs, they often become adults who can't set boundaries, who have this overwhelming need to please people, and who fight a constant battle with anxiety. And they carry this deep, lifelong guilt anytime they even think about putting themselves first, a direct echo of a childhood where they always came second.
Now let's look at how that psychological weight actually becomes a biological one. Because the burden of these early experiences doesn't just hang out in our memories. It gets physically etched into our bodies.
This whole process is explained by something called the weathering hypothesis. Just think about how wind and rain wear down a rock over time. The idea is that chronic stress from things like poverty or trauma does the same thing to our bodies. It literally weathers us, wearing out our internal systems and speeding up aging from the inside. So how in the world can we measure this weathering? Well, scientists have a tool for it, and it's called an epigenetic clock. Think of it like a molecular stopwatch. It doesn't track years, it tracks biological wear and tear by looking at these tiny chemical tags on our DNA that change based on our life experiences.
And when that epigenetic clock starts ticking faster than our actual calendar clock, that's called epigenetic age acceleration, or EAA for short. It's real, measurable, molecular proof that a person's body is aging faster than it should be. It's the direct result of that weathering process.
So what hits the fast-forward button on this clock? Well, it's pretty much all the heavy stuff we've been talking about. Things like chronic adversity, abuse, neglect, and poverty, they've all been scientifically proven to speed up a person's epigenetic clock. And that creates this very real mismatch between how old someone is and how old their body thinks it is.
This speed up in aging also affects the brain's development in a really specific way. It turns out that intense stress early in life can basically hit a fast-forward button, rushing the brain into a kind of premature maturity.
This is what's known as the stress acceleration hypothesis.
And the idea here is fascinating. It suggests that when a kid is in a dangerous or unpredictable environment, the brain doesn't just get damaged by stress, it adapts. It puts the development of its fear and emotional circuits on the fast track, all to better cope with immediate threats. It's trading long-term growth for short-term survival.
A perfect example of this is puberty. Deep in the brain, there's a receptor that acts like a brake. Its entire job is to hold back the flood of hormones until the time is right. But chronic stress, day after day, can wear that brake down. And when it gets too weak, the hormonal floodgates just burst open, triggering puberty years ahead of schedule.
And this biological fast-forwarding leaves a lasting mark. That exact same mechanism that triggers early physical maturity is also tied to a higher risk of anxiety disorders later on. The brain's emotional wiring is basically forced into an adult-like state before the person has the life experience to manage it.
Okay, let's bring all these different pieces together now. We've gone from the psychology of being a parent as a child to the biology of our genes, and they all weave together to tell one single story. A story with really profound, lifelong consequences.
The physical differences in the brain are just stark. Someone who feels younger than their age tends to have more gray matter, literally, more brain hardware in really important areas for thinking and social skills. But in brains that feel older, we actually see less of that brain volume, which lines up perfectly with struggles in things like memory tests.
And those brain differences are a mirror for what's happening in the rest of the body. Having a higher subjective age is a huge predictor of real-world health problems. A greater risk of heart disease and stroke, a higher chance of developing depression, worse cognitive function, and sadly, a higher risk of dying from any cause.
And this is where the psychology circles right back around. The feeling of being old can actually become a self-fulfilling prophecy. I mean, if you see yourself as old and frail, you're probably going to be less active, you might avoid challenges, and those are the very behaviors that speed up a real physical decline.
Just as the research says, the feeling in your mind and the biological stuff happening in your brain, they aren't two separate stories. They are deeply, fundamentally connected. What you experience on the inside is a direct reflection of your own neurobiology. So, if there's one thing to take away from all this, it's that feeling older than your age is not an illusion. It is a profound signal. It's a lifelong echo of how adversity, stress, and responsibility have been physically written into your very cells. It's the story of your life, told by your own biology.
Explore